I hate bodybuilding. Personally, for me, it's not the best style of training to get the greatest physique or be as functional as you can. Obviously, within its own right, bodybuilding is a sport, and if you compete, then of course bodybuilding is going to be for you. But for the majority of people, for beginners, even intermediate lifters, bodybuilding is not going to be the best style of training for you. For me, as someone that plays sports, it's definitely not the best style of training, as I want to be more mobile and agile. And for someone that just wants to improve their physique or be more healthy, be more functional, it's definitely not the right style of training. There's a lot of drawbacks I see from people that do bodybuilding, and I see a lack of results from people that do bodybuilding as well. If bodybuilding is your thing and you found a way to make it work for you, that's absolutely fine. But I think for the majority of lifters, it's not the correct style of training. And I'm going to list a few of the drawbacks. Most of these are things that I've noticed in the gym, and I see people's style of lifting and I don't see any results. And I see this for a few reasons. Firstly, there's a lack of effort. I think when people go into lifting weights for the first time and they choose to do a bodybuilding style split and do that type of training, there's a lack of effort because they're not building any strength and they don't really go in with a plan. They're just like, I'll do this muscle on this day, I'll do this muscle on this day, and then this muscle on this day. But there's no concrete structure, there's no plan behind it. And I think that shows in their training, because I see people just lift the same weights over and over again. When you start training, you don't have that foundation of strength. And when you train like a bodybuilder, you're not building that foundation of strength. Granted, people can actually use progressive overload and try and make their training intense. But most people, they're not going to put in any effort, because a lot of the time they're doing isolation movements. They're not going to put in as much effort as they can. They're not building that much strength. Because they're doing isolations and obviously they can't lift as heavy, a lot of people just stick to the same weight over and over, because that's people's typical mentality. They choose something that they're comfortable with, and because they feel like they're pushing themselves a bit, they'll stick with it. But because there's no actual structure or plan, they stick with it for too long. They don't understand how they need to progress. Because it's an isolation movement, they're going to feel like they're putting in a bit more effort, but they're not. That takes me on to the next point. There's too much of a focus on isolation movements and not enough focus on compounds. If you're a beginner or even intermediate, you should be focusing on compounds, especially if you want to build a good looking physique. Then you want to focus on building your muscles synergistically. Compound movements are movements where more than one muscle is working. And when you're using your muscles in conjunction, they're going to grow in conjunction. So your body's going to look more proportionate. A lot of bodybuilders use isolation movements to help balance out uneven areas of their body. When you're starting out or even intermediate, you just need to focus on building strength and gradually lifting heavier and heavier. And naturally, that's going to take care of most of your physique. If you're doing compounds like a push-up, your upper body is going to be well developed and relatively proportionate. But if you do things like tricep pushdowns and you don't do any chest and you don't do much shoulders, then you're going to end up with a disproportionate physique. So especially if you're beginner to intermediate, you should definitely be focusing more on compounds. Isolation movements are just the icing on the cake. The drawbacks from doing isolations as opposed to compounds as well is that they're not functional. Doing a bicep curl compared to doing a squat is a lot less useful of a movement. But that's in my opinion, because I want to be athletic. I think it's better to be athletic. But even still, having the aim to be a healthy human, you should be aiming to do more functional movements. Not only is doing compounds over isolations going to build you a more proportionate physique, it's also going to make your body more functional. Another reason I dislike bodybuilding is because strength isn't necessary to be big. You can have airy muscle, which doesn't feel good at all when you have big muscles, but they're not as useful as you would expect them to be. You can be big, but you may not be strong. At the end of the day, it does depend on what you care about. Maybe you don't care about strength, but I think that's kind of strange because we need strength in our everyday lives. And the bigger you are, the less strength you have, the more inconvenient it's going to be. Who wants to look big but not strong? Of course you can be both, but purely doing bodybuilding style training, especially in the beginning and intermediate stages, you're going to be skipping over the strength gains you could have made if you focus on this style of training only. Another reason why I dislike bodybuilding is more of a mental reason. It causes a lot of body dysmorphia. When you're doing bodybuilding and you're focusing on all the different muscles of the body, you're isolating all the different areas, you're going to constantly nitpick at different areas of your body. You're going to think, oh, my left shoulder is bigger than my right shoulder, my biceps aren't big enough. You're going to constantly just riddle yourself with anxiety, thinking that you need to improve this, you need to improve that. And looking at yourself is harder to see your own progress. More often than not, it's other people that will tell you that you've made progress. And I'm sure professional bodybuilders will say this as well. You do become too obsessed with how you look. But if it's not for the purpose of anything, if you don't compete, then there's no point in giving yourself that mental stress. Obviously, to a degree, we as people are going to worry about how we look. But training will take care of that. We should understand that if we train consistently over time, our appearance is going to improve. But when you do bodybuilding, you're constantly thinking about it. It's a heavy focus in your mind. You shouldn't be waking up every morning looking at your abs thinking, oh, I'm going to have a carrot for breakfast. If I eat too much, then my abs are going to disappear. You don't need to put yourself through all that mental strain. Obviously, bodybuilding is not a bad style of training. I'm not saying it's completely rubbish. Obviously, there's plenty of successful bodybuilders that compete or don't compete. But more often than not, there's a lack of effort and a lack of balance in people's training. If people go to the gym all the time and just bicep curl the same weight week on week, then of course it's not a useful style of training. You have to have clear goals and a clear plan. You can't look at someone else and think, I want to be like them, so I'm going to do what they did. They probably followed a very specific plan and put in a lot of effort. If you're willing to do that, then great. But you have to understand your goals and why you want to do it. Most people just want to be healthy and have a good looking physique. And you don't need bodybuilding to do that. And for some people, you shouldn't be doing bodybuilding and it won't get you to your goal. You just have to find what works for you. I hope this video helps. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.